So I've always had this theory about writing sermons, and that is, if you can't give your sermon a title, then it means your sermon's all over the place. And so I always write a title for my sermon, but I never tell you what the title is to my sermon. But this morning, the sermon's title is so cute that I thought I might share the sermon title with you. It's called A Mouthful of Dirt and a Lesson in Acceptance. A mouthful of dirt and a lesson in acceptance. Now I'll tell you why I titled it that. So many of you may know, because I talk about it obsessively, in November I'm turning 60. Yeah, I'm finally a grown-up. And I can't stop talking about it because it's really the first time in my life that I'm actually feeling older. Right? I was a very young father. I was a father at 25 years old. I got married when I was 23. I was a father when I was 25. I had my 5th child when I was 35. Right? So that means I was always the youngest parent at preschool. I was always the youngest parent for kids who were in high school, right? So I've always felt very young. For the first time, I'm not feeling so young. You should know many of our congregants are actually younger than me, which is strange, right? Because I became a rabbi at 27 years old. And it's always been, for me, a game of acting older than I actually am. Now I'm actually acting younger than I actually am. But a funny thing happened this past week. The other reason why I know I'm getting old is because when I use words like vibe in a sentence, my kids laugh at me. So you know that the difference between being old and being young is if you fall down and you're old, people go, oh! If you fall down when you're young, people just laugh. So I was playing softball this past week. I play on a softball team of people that are much younger than I am. I mean, most of them are at least 2 decades younger than I am, but some of them are 3 decades younger than I am. And somebody this week asked me, how old are your kids? Which was painful. So instead, I just went to talking about how old my grandchildren are, which happen to be the same age as their children. In any case, this is what happened this past week. We're playing. Now, I'm always trying to convince them that I'm not as old. I hate when they ask me if I get a single, do I want a runner? Anyways, this past week we were playing softball, and I'm a pretty solid baseball player. Ken will tell you that. You better tell them that. And so I'll hit singles. My days of hitting home runs and doubles are over. Not because I can't do it, I just can't run that much. So I hit a solid single this week, and I was very proud of myself on first base. And we got out, next inning came up, but the other team had gotten it, and a guy beat out a run out. Do you know what a run out, where they're running back and forth between, right? And this guy on the other team beat us out, right? He got to the base before we could tag him. So I get a single in the next inning, and I decide, I'm going to do this. So the guy after me gets up, he hits a single, and they overthrow first base. So now I'm going from second to third, I decide. But they picked up the ball right away, and I am stuck between second and third. So I run back and forth a couple of times, and they're getting closer and closer to me. So I decide I'm going to run to third, and I'm going to do a head-first slide. I figured it would completely catch them by surprise. Turns out, it didn't. What's worse about it is that I dove about 5 feet too early, and I had to start to crawl to the third base. Yeah. In any case, that's how I got a mouthful of dirt. No, but you should have seen the applause I got. my team went crazy. They literally ran out the field and picked me up. Not like on their shoulders, but just off the ground, they picked me up. So I grew to understand very, very quickly this week. Now, thankfully, I didn't break anything. I didn't hurt anything. I have a scraped knee, which I'm getting tremendous sympathy from my wife for. Yeah, a scraped knee and maybe a little bit of a dented ego, but it was well worth it just to remember what it was like to be able to do those things. It's funny, and it's very funny because I just brushed off the clay, took a mouthful of water to get rid of some of the dirt that was in my mouth. I literally had dirt in my mouth. Yeah. But it was fun. I mean, it was like being a kid again. So, but we hold on all the time to these things, right? We hold on to our youth and we make bargains with God all the time. Just let me be able to do this one more time. You should know I'll never do that again. I might do it again. But we make bargains with God all the time because we want things more than we often have. We want to recapture our youth. We want to go back and undo mistakes that we've made in our lives. And so we make bargains all the time with God. Just let me be able to do this one more time. Let me be able to see these people one more time. Let's just go back a little bit in time. And that's exactly how this morning's Parashat begins with Moses. Moses says, "Ve'etchanan el Adonai be'itahi lemor." At this moment, Moses pleads with God, I just want to go into the land of Israel. I just want to just go in. I don't need to be the leader, Moses says. I don't need to be in charge anymore. Just let me go into the land. This is what we've been working for the last 40 years. I just want to be in the Holy Land. And God says, Ravlach, right? It's enough already. You've had so much in your life. It's enough already. Stop asking. And you can already hear the little child coming out in Moses and the parent that is God. The child who says to the parent, oh, come on, please, I really want. Right? And the parent eventually says, what I always says, yeah, sure, here it is. But the parent usually says, no. It's not going to be that way. And it's heartbreaking. And God's response is so abrupt, but it's true. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes life doesn't permit it. Sometimes you can't get what you want back. Rashi's interpretation of this phrase, Ravlach, is even more brutal. He says, V'yitaber Adonai bi le'manchem v'lo shama elai. Rashi says that God was, if he wasn't even listening to Moses. Vayomer Adonai elai Ravlach al tosef daber elai od bidvar hazeh. Stop talking about this, God says. We've gone over this 1,000 times. You're not going into the land of Israel. And I can hear that from my childhood. I can hear that as a younger parent say to my children, having said to me as a child, it's enough already. We've gone over this 1,000 times. It's not going to happen. But we know that desire, that strong will to want to be able to go back. And Rashi goes on further. Al tosef daber elai. Stop talking to me about this. We know how short we can get with each other when we want something so badly, but it's just not going to happen. Rashi is teaching that Moses didn't stop praying for what he wanted. And that's an important lesson also. That just because it's not going to happen doesn't mean we can't wish for it, hope for it. Continue to pray for it, Rashi says. Then there's another response, and that's from Dvarim Rabbah. It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, 215 pa'amim hitpalel Moshe be'oto sha'a. Dvarim Rabbah, the Midrash on the book of Deuteronomy, says that Moses prayed 515 times. Can you imagine? 515 times. Now they do this big gematria thing. Gematria is the numerical value of each letter, right? Apparently we have 515 bones in our body, according to the Midrash. And because of that, Moses prayed with every bone in his body, with every ability that he has 515 times. And what's really, really interesting, the Midrash offers us is something quite beautiful. And that is Moses pleads with God 515 times. And it seems as though God doesn't really lose God's patience. Could you imagine what it would be like if somebody approached you 515 times with the same request over and over and over again? And God still remains patient with him. Moses offered 515 prayers until God said, no more, it's enough already. Hope, according to this Midrash, is not the problem. Prayer, according to Rashi before, is not the problem. What the problem is our inability to accept reality. That's really what happens, and that's the problem. Whether it's Rabbi Harold Kushner in his book When Bad Things Happen to Good People, or it's Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who often emphasize the maturity of faith that accepts unanswered prayers as part of a larger divine plan, or even thinkers like Reinhold Niebuhr, whose serenity prayer has become the foundational expression of acceptance in the spiritual act, when he says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Acceptance is the last and perhaps the holiest stage of prayer. And while Torah gives us wisdom, modern thought echoes it powerfully. In her groundbreaking work on emotional resilience, psychologist Susan David writes, courage is not an absence of fear. Courage is fear walking. And the acceptance is not passive resignation. It's a courageous acknowledgement of what is. She continues, when we accept ourselves and our reality with compassion, we open the door to growth. Not the growth of control or conquest, but the quiet, steady growth of maturity. And then that's what Moses teaches us. That's what turning 60 is teaching me. To let the dream of hitting the home run go. To know it's just not going to happen for me. To appreciate the value of, thankfully, sometimes getting to sit on the bench for an inning or two. To know that sometimes the holiest thing we can do is stop bargaining with God and begin living with grace. Pirkei Avot teaches a great lesson. Who is rich? One who is content with his portion. I think I've told you that story once at a funeral. Rabbi used that phrase, Ezehu Ashir Mishe Sameach B'Chalko, who's wealthy, who's rich, the person who's content with their portion. And his secretary, in transcribing that eulogy, wrote, who is rich? He who is content with his portion. I used to think that phrase, who is rich, who's content with his portion, was about money. Now I actually think it's about time. It's about energy. It's about age. It's about letting go of the person you thought you should be and embracing the person you are. And clay stains and all, crow's feet and all, that's what I'm beginning to do. So here's the prayer I offer now, not 515 times, but once. That we learn to accept the no's in our lives, not as dead ends, but as redirections. That we have the courage to sit on the bench with gratitude, to run when it counts, and yes, even to slide headfirst now and then. But just to remember where we have been and how far we've come. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We continue with Musaf, page 180.